We live in an age of turbulence and ecological uncertainty. We are conscious consumers who seek meaning, yet the places where we shop are no longer fit for purpose. We want experiences rather than transactions, circularity instead of waste, the way forward, not the past. South Bank is a revolutionary new retail environment where brands can innovate outside traditional limits and reconnect with their communities. A modular and multifunctional design makes South Bank flexible and radically sustainable, redefining luxury for a new generation. South Bank will merge physical and digital spaces to create an ecosystem of experiences that honor individuality, diversity, and creative expression. Dynamic spaces will support seamless delivery and sell-through, tracking, anticipating, and responding to consumer demand. The role of retail needs to change. South Bank will transform how we shop and allow for deeper customer relationships. Immersive environments will support new levels of engagement, data-driven feedback, and richer consumer touchpoints. South Bank will facilitate active collaboration and lifelong learning, placing brands at the core of discovery and self-improvement. Our expectations are changing, and retail must respond. South Bank is the next evolutionary step. We invite you to become part of the solution and join the wave of brands at the forefront of the future.
Hi, I'm Robert Timon. I'm the founder of Frame, a global community platform for spatial design. Welcome to Next and Now, Exploring the Future of Retail, which is a talk series aimed at rewriting retail design codes for a new generation of consumers. This event series is brought to you by Melbourne property developer Beulah in partnership with Frame. In case you're asking yourself where I'm sitting, well, I'm hosting this event live from Link & Co.'s Amsterdam Club. Link & Co. is an innovative mobility provider that offers subscriptions to cars. Imagine a 2.7 billion commercial and residential development planned to totally transform Melbourne's cityscape. Imagine more than 30,000 square meters of commercial space situated in the Podium of what will be Australia's tallest building. This ambitious project, labeled South Bank by Beulah, will be completed in 2028. Beulah, its Melbourne-based developer, is aiming to rewrite the script of living in a vertical city to meet the demands of the next generation of consumers. And revolutionizing its retail spaces is a major part of that script. How will phygital and digital realities in that commercial environment need to intersect? How can truly sustainable concepts be realized? And how will retailers be able to attract consumers to visit physical spaces in a digital-first world? Today we'll share the vision of 7 thought-leading experts on the future of retail. But before we get to the discussion, I'd like to introduce to you Beulah's co-founder and executive director, Adeline Tay, and Beulah's general manager, commerce and culture, David Monaghan. And they are live in Melbourne. Melbourne, how are you?
Good, Robert.
We're good, thank you.
Great to have you here. Well, that was an impressive kickoff with this video that is certainly setting the scene. It's looking very futuristic. And we are very keen to know what's behind that vision. So Adeline, can you tell us a bit more about Beulah? What is your mission with Beulah? What do you like to achieve?
Yeah, so at Beulah, we're a Melbourne property developer, but since day one, we are always driven to pioneer a different approach to Melbourne's property and lifestyle landscape. We're really driven to bring about positive change for cities and communities. Our mission at Beulah is to create transformational spaces and experiences for present and future generations. So, for us, it's not just about creating a space. We recognize as developers, we have this incredible honor and responsibility to create something that would literally transform the city and transform the communities that surround it as well. So in everything that we do, we're about how do we push boundaries? If it's a project, a residential project, it's how do we push boundaries in living? How do we enhance people's lifestyle? If it's commercial or retail or art and culture, we're always driven by that vision is how do we push the boundaries? How do we create something that's transformational, not just a space, but also experiences? And not just for today, it's for present and future generations. We recognize and we acknowledge that whatever we do, we leave a legacy for the people in the city. So we're really about creating transformation. We're really about leaving legacies. And how do we do that? We collaborate with people. We collaborate with the best teams. We see ourselves as innovation catalysts. We don't just come up with the solution. We come up with the solution with a team of people who are passionate and committed about creating change for the environment, for the planet, for the cityscape as well. And that's where we have come in, with this project as well, is to create, how do we create change in every single area that we are doing?
So can you give a bit more characteristics of this South Bank by Beulah project that we are discussing today?
Yeah. So South Bank by Beulah we see this as a vertical garden city or a vertical mini metropolis. It's a multifaceted and a pedestrian-friendly destination. It's around 270,000 square meters of programs with a strong emphasis on placemaking. Our vision for South Bank since day one is not just to build another project for Melbourne, it's to really create a new heart for South Bank. There will be an innovative art gallery in partnership with Centre Pompidou from Paris. There's commercial offices, there's a 3,000-seater auditorium, 4 distinct collections of residences, there's childcare, there's an integrated health and wellness precinct, experiential retail spaces, and 6,000 square meters of green public spaces as well that runs throughout the entire project. So our vision for South Bank, is not just creating this development, but it's creating a landmark and a place that is alive and active 24/7. That creates a destination not just for locals, but also for visitors to experience, to live, work, play, to revitalize. To create an integrated vertical community. And of course, the architecture that was a result of an international architecture competition that we ran a few years ago, designed by the brilliant UN studio and Cox Architecture. It's a stunning sculptural form composed of 2 towers, defined by the glass facades, and also the highest vertical garden in the world. And we hope this will set an exemplar of biophilic design, creating a vertical community that focuses in health and wellness, in art and culture, in sustainability, technology, and so on. So that is how we see South Bank by Beulah.
It certainly sounds like you will be pushing the boundaries with this project, and I'm sure that it's unprecedented for this part of the world. So let's have a closer look at the design of that building, which, as you said, Adeline, results from a competition that's been won by the Amsterdam-based studio UN Studio, headed by Caroline Bos and Ben van Berkel, in collaboration with Cox Architects from Australia. So this is what the architects themselves have to say about their design.
What I thought was so great about the location is that it is on the one hand very closely related to this botanical garden and the inner city on the one hand, and it will be seen from so many parts of the city, but that it also so nicely connects to all this liveliness of Melbourne.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yes, and everywhere really you continuously see this green, and it's a lively greenness. It twists around.
Yeah. That's why we call it a project with a twist. Towards many arguments and readings, you can have many views towards this location, not alone, but you can have also many opinions and after images from this project, because it generates so many wonderful, diverse thoughts.
Melbourne very much has its own very distinct architectural style, as it were, or language, which I think this is a thought through response to that, bringing it slightly further. We can see some idea of the veranda, of porch living there, and facades that really gives something, gives an expressiveness to the city, but in a new way.
That I think is the key maybe of the design, that we thought endlessly about making something unique for Melbourne, and that it stands out and that people can point at it and can say, well, we loved it when we were there and we'd like to go back, because it's an enjoyable project, because it's so unique. And I think that's maybe the key of how we brought in not only the formal questions of the design, but also the programmatic diversity and inclusiveness of the design. But it is really also unique in that what we designed the new studio, not? If you think about everything we designed, I mean, this is actually so new.
This is really new.
So new, yet the architects speak in black and white. How nice a contrast is that? So now it's time to zoom in on the building's podium. 30,000 square meters across 9 floors dedicated to retail, hospitality, work and wellness. And this is where you come in, David. David, what will be the podium's role in that high rise?
Well, I mean, in very simple terms, I mean, it acts as a very important amenity for the rest of the building. And as Adeline said, the building has a significant amount of residential and office and a hotel with 4 seasons, Centre Pompidou in 3,000 odd square metres. So the podium that sits below those 2 towers acts a very important amenity space to service workers, residents and visitors, not only for the building itself, but also for wider Melbourne and also interstate within Australia and international from that perspective.
So we'll need to become a true destination. You did some research to get to this building, to the design of it, and to the content of the podium. You did research into the key consumer trends that will influence how we will live in the nearby future. So can you talk a little bit around those trends, what they are about, and how they will influence the conception of the podium?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the trends that we sort of uncovered a couple of years ago, and this really came from the idea that we're looking at a retail podium in the future that is on the doorsteps of an established CBD retail area. What will we, I mean, in a simple way, what will we fill it with? That's going to be relevant for the future, meaningful to brands, meaningful to Melburnians, Australians, and the world from that perspective. So we needed to do a lot of research associated with that. And out of that research, we identified about 8 macro trends. And we're using those macro trends to really think about the mix, the positioning, the vision, the style of the podium space. Those macro trends talk about the importance of learning, the importance of wellness, the importance of decelerating and slowing down, the importance of transparency and genuineness, the breaking down of what luxury means, also the importance of sort of the digital and the physical and the curation and the importance of experience over transaction. So it's very much a roadmap for us in many ways. It's very much an opportunity then to take that roadmap and go and have those conversations with brands and industry partners to really think about the future of that space that's going to be relevant for Melbourne, in 5 to 6 years.
David, it sounds like you'll reinvent life itself. But we're here to discuss the future of retail. That will make up a major part of the Podium space. David, why is it necessary to reinvent retail? Why did you decide to dedicate a live event with some of the world's leading retail experts to explore the future of retail?
Yeah, I mean, look, a really interesting and important question, and I think this is something that goes back even before COVID. You know, retail, I think around the world and certainly in Australia was struggling. You know, it's sort of lost its way. There was a sort of large generational shift in terms of what people wanted and what they were expecting. In many ways, the retail model prior to COVID was quite cookie cutter like. You know, it was like in many cities around the world, retail was focused on high street or in shopping centres. There was a lot of sameness there. The commercial model was very much arguably weighted on the landlord side. You know, you had a lease, you had a rent, you had a space. There was a lack of flexibility and really a lack of relevance, in my opinion, for the future. And I think COVID exacerbated that. But what it does mean, it gives us an incredible opportunity to reinvent retail, or at least the space, the physical space, and to really support brands and some of the leading brands who are also wrestling with the future, and to provide a space for them to create something really special that's relevant for the future generation. And that's why it's super exciting. And I think really the next 5 to 10 years, particularly, is going to be a really exciting area for retail.
So you asked us to interview 7 experts in retail. They all work for forward-looking retail brands. Who are they? We have Jelle Sapolete. He's the global retail design director of Adidas, based in Herzogenaurach in Germany. Then Jenny Lee, she's the live at home leader at IKEA in Stockholm. Kevin Wong, he's the senior vice president of global store design and development at Capri Holdings. That's the mother company of brands such as Jimmy Choo, Michael Kors, and Versace. Then there's Max Svert. He is the co-founder and creative director of Axel Arigato. And Sanaz Desai Parham, she is the brand director of Axel Arigato. Matt Spores, he's the director of architecture and store design at Dunhill. And Neil Sharman, he's a global design director and architect based in London. So we asked them to share their visions of the future of retail. We sent them a set of questions and we interviewed each of them. So we recorded, we condensed, and we edited their replies and divided them over 6 chapters. And this is what they have to say. Let's have a look at the first chapter.
What are the key conditions for a retailer to be successful in a mixed-use space such as the Podium that's being developed? I think there's a couple of different components. Obviously, you know, in the real estate world, it holds true in retail. It holds true in, I think, any sector that has to deal with any sort of development. It's location, location, location. Obviously, looking at the development, South Bank seems to be an area that's growing quite quickly and continues to grow. So I think location-wise, it's key just to make sure that there will be traffic to the location.
I think from a brand perspective, when we go out and look at spaces, what is super important for us, it's first and foremost the neighbors. And when I say neighbors, I mean the other brands you find in that location. That I do think is the number one for any brand out there, is the first question they ask. What other brands will actually be having a store in this area?
For Dunhill to perform great in this environment, it's in a mall like this, you still want lots of daylight, lots of freshness, lots of brightness, lots of openness. For me, it's kind of keeping it clean, keeping the clarity and the details really simple as well, and making it timeless. We want to design stores which then last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It's like, we don't want to keep designing stores for 3 years, and it's just, the sustainability doesn't work in that matter.
When we look for a space, we also look like which part of the city we're in and what is the energy around the location. So you don't necessarily only look at what is the actual site, but what's also surrounding the site. And I think in this case, it's very interesting because there's a large art community, but there's also the botanic gardens. So there's a link to nature.
As a retailer, it's always interesting to see the proximity to the apartments, to the restaurants, to the culture, and to the kind of obviously the major flow of where the luxury players are playing.
Typically, what could be interesting is what is the local nature? What is the local community doing over there? That's always shaping the store and retail that gives it more local flavor.
So many times you may get a shopping mall which opens up, but it doesn't have the basics. It doesn't have a butcher's. It doesn't have a baker's. It doesn't have a post office. It forgets the basic essentials which we need. Doctor surgeries, all of these things. So many times you see a new development and it's missing the key essentials to life. And if it has that and has that organic flow to make these things work, then I think it'd be very useful.
Then for me and for us as a brand, from our perspective, when we go out looking for spaces or department stores, aesthetics and how much we're able to affect the aesthetics is super crucial for us, because if we cannot have, our installations or a certain height of the ceiling, it's a no-go for us. So we're very focused around, what we're able to achieve experience-wise. And that all starts with the space.
It's about how do you design a space that is suitable for disassembly and adaptability. We can't just design something that this is the vision, this is what it is, and then come 28, 27, it's not fit for purpose anymore. And I think some of the issues that I see personally with spaces in general and how we design spaces is that we don't think about the fact that we are evolving, we do change, we have different needs, different priorities. So we have to design spaces that adapt to those needs.
And how flexible actually the landlord is in the different cases. And if the landlord actually is able to be flexible in those different areas in terms of do's and don'ts, we believe we're able to create a much stronger experience. So I think like neighbors, flexibility from the landlord, those are really the keys for us to start working with creative things, creative ideas, because either we're constrained or we're free, and we love to be free,
I think the dialogue has to be very flexible with the landlord in terms of what their expectations are versus what the retailer's expectations are. And if the goal is to create a cultural space, then that component also has to be part of the discussion. I think the landlord has to give flexibility to the brands to express their design aesthetic. If there's a very heavy hand in terms of how the overall architecture looks, the brands will lose its identity.
So how do we start to kind of look about the flexibility of a space? Is it about designing one room for one purpose, or is it about creating a space that you can kind of evolve over time, and it doesn't have to be complex in that sense. It can be about understanding how my simplicity, like, walls that can be altered to kind of meet multiple functions, or can it be about how we integrate technology in a way that's going to allow for these spaces to, marry the virtual with the physical in that sense as well. So I think it's about playing with the tools and techniques that we have today, but amplifying them in the future as well.
But the idea that there is a fluidity and a flexibility over the course of, years, I'm not talking weeks, could be very exciting, because it costs a lot of money for brands to fit these stores out. So there could be quite an interesting dynamic where things are a little bit more agile.
But it's also very important, if you don't gonna have any boundaries, you need to be a good curator. If you're not a good curator without boundaries, things go to hell.
So David, apart from the good old location, one key success factor stands out in this video, at least to me, and that's flexibility. So all of these brands, they want to have an adaptive use of space and time, because they want to have the freedom to express their identity, organize events, and evolve their approach over time. So that would be a departure from formulaic shopping centers as we know them. So what would this mean for a landlord like Beulah to adopt such an approach and give so much more flexibility to brands? Is that possible even?
I think this is such an exciting topic and idea, and this goes back to those thoughts that I said before about that sort of cookie cutter approach with the traditional, let's say, shopping centre in the past, where you have 3 walls and a shop front, and it's very fixed, and you have fixed hours of trading. It's very formulaic, and it's restrictive. Here is an opportunity now to really think about space in a really new and exciting way, that's relevant for the future. A flexible space, a modular space, a multifunctional space that is personalized to the brand. So from our perspective, in thinking about the design of the Podium, we definitely want to provide and work closely with brands to provide those sorts of spaces. And I think there's an onus on a landlord or a developer to work with a brand, to support a brand's story, their narrative, and to allow them to express their brand in their own individual way. And I think you've got to do that going forward to stay relevant, to create the experiences that brands now expect, and quite frankly, that consumers expect. So I think for us, it's about taking the risk, having the flexibility to create different sorts of spaces, thinking about different models, and really aiming for something that's future relevant.
Thanks, David. It looks like you have your work cut out for you for the next years. So the Podium will need to offer something else, something different than retail experiences that we are used to. And I'm mentioning here the word experiences. So experience is everything in retail these days. So we've asked our team of experts how they see experiential retail evolve in a mixed-use space like the Podium in South Bank by Beulah. Let's have a look at the next chapter.
So how do people experience the brand? How do people experience the store? How do people customize what they're going to see in the store before they get there?
So if you think about today's society, we're much more connected than ever before. What that means is that people are way more aware and way more informed about what they do know, and what they don't know, they can easily find out, right? So what this results is that customers are really empowered. They know what they want, they know how to get it, and they also have the luxury of being very selective. And what's even really important is that they have the power to influence their community. So in essence, for these kind of mixed-use hybrid retail spaces, it's really important to see the customer as part of the ecosystem that they want to build. You need to see them as a co-creator, an investor, and not just solely an end user that we're serving to. It's about getting them to be involved from the highest level, from the beginning to the end, because ultimately it's the everyday people that's going to be interacting in the space on a daily basis that's going to be pivotal to its success.
So as a brand, can explore other areas than just retail. Like we had in the past a lot of activations around sports events, but I can even imagine if you have this residential tower, there's a hotel on top. And I would actually question, with this hotel, would you as a brand be able to have some of the rooms available for your consumer? So you can offer a full weekend instead of just an afternoon of shopping. As a brand, you should not stop with customizing the hotel rooms. You should actually plan how your day could look like. This is what a typical influencer would do, or an athlete would do. They would go for a run around the botanical gardens. They would go for, they would go to the museum in the art district. But you need to be specific. You need to tell them which exhibition and what is the exact track that you would walk or would run. Then you would feel like this is a personal experience for an influencer that you can relate to. and therefore also is inviting to you.
You know, I think we want to be able to create an environment where it's really about the experience. It's about, do I go because I want to be outside, or do I want a community, or do I want to have some entertainment, whether it's going to a restaurant or, you know, going to see something in the theater. And then I think the retail, the shopping part of it all has to be weaved into it very cleverly. And, you know, I think we've seen in the past 10, 15 years, retail has actually moved in this direction. And it's not anything new. It's just, how do you continue to elevate that experience by giving people something that they desire that will get them through the door?
What about the landlord sets a brief to the actual retailer? What if they lay down a theme? What if they say what they want the store to be unique, different, have a 100% sustainability point of view, and it has to have X amount of interactions digitally, or it has to be constantly changing and evolving. And I think that is where it comes to life.
I think that department stores or stores in general can push the tenants as well, push the brands that they're working with, saying, hey, for this season, what we're doing is kind of laser focused on, Web3 and the metaverse, and whatever concept we bring to our department store needs to have some kind of connection to that, so that it's cohesive and it's strong and it's pushing the envelope.
For me, it's like the design of the shopping mall should be quite simple, clean, aesthetically pleasing, lots of planting, lots of green, lots of light, lots of fresh air. It's a place I want to go and I want to spend more time in. I don't want to go somewhere which is covered in billboards and flashing lights and then make me feel like I'm from Blade Runner. It needs to have a little bit more clarity. And I think from the design background that I've come from, it's like I respect simplicity and I respect the calmness as well.
Why not write a script? Why not write a story? But the idea of like guest editors for the mall could be quite spectacular, and writing the narrative of what everyone has to adhere to in their own respected approaches. The spaces themselves to respond to such a brief would almost probably have to feel and be a little bit like film sets. They don't have to look like that. They are kind of ready with the latest digital cabling. They are ready with power and data. Do we always have to have barriers towards stores? Can they actually cross-percolate and become, have a presence in the mall themselves? Right? The obvious way is a luxury corridor, and people aim towards the luxury corridor. And that's where, all of our peers are. It would be very interesting to slightly disrupt that. What does it look like if you put luxury brands on different floors? What does it look like if you have portals into different shopping areas?
I think we're living in a world now where it's so much about our lifestyle, and it's not really about creating these specific pockets for people to go shop. So it's not like, all right, let's just put retailers in there that is apparel or accessories or electronics. I think people want to, especially in a place like Melbourne where the weather is nice most of the time, I think people want to be going, and they want to be able to go to a center or a podium such as this without the idea of actually going to buy something.
It's really difficult when you get a shopping mall that you end up getting, this is the food quarter, this is the luxury quarter, this is this quarter. I think that really annoys me sometimes because I don't want to go to a food quarter with every other brand in. I'd rather have like niche brands, which are kind of like spotted around and then broken apart. So it becomes an easier flow.
So I think the difficulty is when you have like a typical shopping mall, when it's only 100% retail, it's not diverse enough to attract the type of consumer you would typically like to attract. Especially when it's mixed usage, it allows consumers, but also different consumers to come in. And I think that's always the interesting part, because the mixed usage is allowing you to also be exposed to different types of consumers that you necessarily not have in a typical high street location. So I think that's really important.
Obviously, I think the baseline is retail, which is stores, shopping. But I think the other part, that the component to it, is the experience, which is whether, there could be a park that's part of it, or it could be outdoor space or art installation spaces or cinema or anything that would create sort of community.
There's a wealth of ideas scattered around here. I would like to have your opinion on one of them. to me, it really stood out that these people see a role for appointed curators or guest editors to push brands to create scripted and ever-changing experiences. So it's interesting that on the one hand, they want to have all that freedom. On the other hand, they want you to tell them what they should be doing. So what's your view on that? Could you make that happen?
Well, I mean, it might be a bit of both, actually, Robert. I mean, I really like this idea, and especially some of those comments from Neil. You know, this guest editor, this curator, almost gallery-like, exhibition, installation-like, which again goes against and away from that traditional model of a centre manager in a shopping centre or a marketing manager in a shopping. So you're starting to sort of think about specialists, storytellers, people who really understand retail, but across different categories as well. So I think for us in this development, it is going to be about curators, and it is going to be about potentially guest editors, looking and managing and creating and working with brands across floors to create really interesting stories from that perspective. So I think that really brings in a really important almost storytelling, personalized sort of thematic, which is relevant, again, going back to that research and thinking about future generations and what they want in a space from that perspective. So I think what Neil is saying, what Jelle is saying, I totally agree with what Matt is saying from Dunhill as well. I think these are really interesting ideas, and I think it's important in where it goes from an experiential perspective.
Thanks, David. Now, we could talk, I have the feeling, all night Australian time, all afternoon Amsterdam time about this particular chapter, but we need to move on to the next one, which is more about designing for a community. So the South Bank Podium will be an integral part of a residential high-rise, which begs for the question how to address and include the residents and the immediate surroundings. And this is what our panel had to say about that.
The interesting part, again, for this site is that when you have all these different amenities in your building, you can basically start designing for a community rather than for a consumer.
One approach could be about exploration of the different micro communities that live within that area. You know, micro communities that focus less on gender, less on age, less on race, and more on shared values and common interests. I think it's important, first and foremost, is reaching out to the community that live there. It's not so easy to design a space and make it feel inclusive without actually understanding the customers first. So the designers of the Podium really need to reach out to the communities to understand, you know, what is it those communities that live in there are interested in, what are the values that they share, what are the commonalities, and then that will inform how the space that they design is built and created, so that the people will be more actively encouraged and feel more confident about entering the space and feeling that they're part of that ecosystem.
Whether it's a community center for performance or cultural engagement, that would be an outreach to other communities, diverse communities, to bring them into these spaces, to allow these communities to use them and to really be able to enliven the community by bringing the diversity that they would.
We build a community through the different activations and events that take place within our spaces. 2019, before the pandemic, we had 52 events in our physical stores. That can be everything from, you know, sneaker cleaning to free tattoos to merch pop-ups and different live experiences with artists.
And parties.
From a retailer perspective, it's really to try to envisage a culture of what these spaces can create and harvest. I'm a big believer in, obviously, the digital, but I'm also a big believer in the physical. And I think there are so many restrictions on certain things in sports. For example, if you talk about, say, skateboarding, could you create a sort of a skateboarding arena in this shopping center in a safe way.
I love the idea if it could, if within the center there is an integration of some sort of performance space, let's say, that could be used by local theater or given to local schools for them to create some sort of environment where students can do their performances outside of their actual schools so that it's a shared community experience. I think I would also like to see more of a play on how we can get people, if they're outside of the immediate area, into the Podium to experience things that they may not have in the communities that they are.
I'll be honest, like I don't see the future of retail in selling more product. Like it's not just about selling more product, because it's not about the product, it's about the people wearing the product and how you relate to those people. So if you can sell an experience that the people wearing your product within that building, that could be exciting, because then as a consumer, you can basically live and dream the people you endorse. So that would actually make you come closer to the brand, and instead of just buying the shoe or the product. And I think that's the interesting thing, is that's where the opportunity lies. And that's also where this building has the opportunity to go into.
I think what's important is for brands to begin to carve out spaces within their retail space to allow their customers to come in to experience what it is to be part of that brand, but not necessarily about, here's a garment, go buy it.
Can you bring in the culture of, you know, what we've seen with sneakers and streetwear into this kind of world of where you want, obviously you want youth, but also you want, people that are coming for dinner. You know, I think there's an idea of, pop-up restaurants and pop-up culture that could be very, very exciting.
It's actually more engaging, and it's better for a brand to work directly with your consumer on product rather than telling them how to make the product better. Because I don't think it's even the role of a brand to tell a consumer how to make it better. I think the interesting part is not the product, it's the process. Allowing consumer to do something different rather than only shopping is probably key moving forward.
The more possibilities, the better. If we're allowed to have a party in the store after hours, super good. In general, that is not allowed in department stores, or to be honest, it's never allowed in department stores. So that's a plus. If they even have, gardens you can utilize for a shoot, or they have gardens that you can utilize for an installation during press days. I mean, the more you're able to take part of what's inside of the building, the better it is.
With regards to social sustainability, bringing in the community into the areas as well is a key thing. Within London, people are afraid to go down Bond Street because it's too luxury. The doors are closed, but the shops are open, so you don't feel welcome into these areas. A key thing we've learned in China and Asia when we open our stores is we don't put doors on these stores anymore. We just make sure the entrance is as wide as possible so people they can come in, that there's no fixed barrier between these two areas. It becomes a clear flow between the mall and the store. So it's not us and them anymore. It's just like everyone is welcome.
We are still craving this idea of a community or a town hall or a town center where people can come together from different parts of the city and be able to use the space freely and feel comfortable that they do have a place of belonging.
So, David, designers of the Podium will need to reach out to the local community and learn about their needs to make South Bank relevant and inclusive. And this could result ultimately in, for instance, shared community spaces for education and culture, and they won't deliver any revenue for you. So could this be a breakthrough for a commercial center, or is this blue sky thinking? And tell us why.
Well, I think Robert, again, this is really about the future. I think there needs to be a balance between commercial return, but also about positively contributing to society and the planet and supporting brands in their stories. And the beauty of a mixed-use development, I think, over maybe just a standalone, retail specific, and that's it, is that the risk can be shared, or the return can be shared across different elements within the project from that perspective. But it also, I think, ultimately ends up with about programming. And I think a number of those speakers spoke about that, the importance of not selling things or relying on just selling things, but it's about the stories that the brands can bring to a space. And I think Neil and Yele and Matt talked about that in terms of creating a program within the space that brings the community into the space, that talks about, in some cases, making, repairing, where products are from, where the brand originates from. Those sorts of stories and those sort of narratives are so important going forward. And this is where this idea of moving away from transaction into experiences for landlords like us, providing the platform and the physical space that those brands can operate within, and then having the programs within that space to be able to support that brand. And those programs are really about storytelling and giving the flexibility for brands and the community to learn and operate within. And as Adeline said earlier, one of the aspects about the building is, and I'm just thinking about the community here and the beauty of a mixed-use development being able to provide different usages for the community, is the auditorium. And Adeline, I don't know whether you want to just touch on that auditorium and the importance of the auditorium within the project overall.
Yeah, the auditorium is strategically placed kind of in the center of the whole development. We see it as this connective tissue between the towers and the podium. And it's really kind of seeing how a town hall acts in a city, but in this sense, a vertical city. So it becomes a community space where all the users can use, be it the residents or the commercial workers or visitors in the podium or people who are visiting the art gallery. Even landlords or retailers, could use that space as well. And we see this as a hive of activity for all these different people who are coming into this building throughout this 24 hours, attracting different kind of users. And I guess that really creates this community that attracts, a variety of people, be it artists who have artists in residence programs in the retail spaces, or kids who are coming for workshops or master classes, or youth who are here to visit Centre Pompidou's programs as well. And all this mixed use development is really creating a community, a diverse community, that there is a place for everyone. And that is, I think, the idea of this vertical community.
Thanks.
And I might say, Robert, just to add on to that as well. I mean, the beauty of what we can do here with a mixed-use development is yes, provide some unique spaces that provide a platform for the brands within the podium space, but also surround the podium with really interesting areas that the brands can connect into. And as Adeline's saying, whether that's the auditorium or whether it's hotel or whether it's a collaboration with the Centre Pompidou, that's, I think, a really important role for the future landlord or the future developer in terms of supporting, the brands to express themselves in unique ways that are relevant for the future customer.
Thanks, David. Another topic that Adeline addressed in her introduction is sustainability. So Beulah embraces sustainability as a core value. So we asked the experts how they feel the podium should address sustainability, and here's their feedback.
I think to talk about conscious consumption, I think it's it's the future. We are constantly, I think, being reminded about how much we consume.
So if you think about a traditional retail model, it's all about advertise, sell, and buy. But how might we create an experience that is actually centered on changing consumer behaviors, or even influencing and shaping a consumer behavior? You know, what would a retail space look like in the future, where we focus less on consumption and more on reduction? What if in the future retail spaces actually took the audience on the journey of provenance and craftsmanship, instead of the focus of the retail space being on the end product? And we actually take them on a journey of how the product is sourced, how the product is crafted, and how the product is designed. And, you know, could a similar model be explored where we create a frictionless retail experience that follows the principles of a circular economy? So if we want to do a model where we're bringing back, inviting the consumer to bring back goods that they've bought from a brand back to the brand store, so that we can actually look at how we upcycle them, that really is centered on the spatial design of the space, and how is the actual Beulah South Bank building designed to facilitate that.
I think the brands can support this idea. Looking at how they repair items, I mean, everyone will get a customer who comes back in and says, this is broken, how to repair it? And it's I think I've done it in the past where they say, oh, we'll give you a refund and we'll take it away. I think this is where brands need to kind of take this on board. And it's easier for luxury players because they probably have more money. But for smaller players, maybe they need to learn from the larger people on how we do this and what we do. And maybe there's a shared knowledge of tailors and watch repair people and a repair shop, which is shared within this building as a shared service. But then this goes back to the locality of where the butchers is, the fishmongers is. It's like, if there is kind of a central base of tailors and then watchmakers and elements like these people, then at least these people will know, and the mall will know this, and the community will know this. That if I need my trousers taken up, I will take it to this person. And it goes back to locality again. But then on the local area, how does sustainability help this, and how do people feed into this? Does it have a recycling center in its basement? Do the community work to this one goal? Do all the tenants work to this local area as well? Is there a food bank in the building as well, where all the food waste goes, which is then kind of recycled and made into soil, which then helps the planting above? These sound like utopian ideas, but it seems really simple. It's very simple ideas.
When we talk about sustainability, we talk about betterment, and betterment means for us better for the planet, better for the people, and also better for the brand. For me, in relationship to this building, is that it needs to be 100% made out of sustainable materials. It also needs to leverage nature in a smart way. And I also understand with the greenery embedded in the facade, it can leverage the cooling elements, and it also looks very pretty, to be honest.
I think we need to be very cautious about how we use these sustainable materials, or what these sustainable materials, and really understand the life cycle of how they got to where they are. But yes, I do think that the building, the architecture, if these materials are truly, or not even materials, if it goes beyond that, it's methodology. You know, how do we put it together? You know, are the lights that we're using all LED lights? Are they all on sensors so that when the person leaves the room, the lights turn off? There's a lot of different ways to do this. Materiality, construction methodology, technology is obviously helping us to be able to create these environments that are less consumptive in its energy.
When we opened the first store, now we have 13, but the first store, that store was destroyed after one day because we had a very wild event. So we had to repaint the floor, we had to repaint everything. And then we realized, okay, exactly as Hans described, we need certain materials that actually can survive a place that is a living space. That can be a nightclub, it can be a store. So now we go into all spaces with a completely different different mindset or pair of glasses. Yeah. It needs to be materials that actually can survive and stay there in the long run. So for us, sustainability, it comes down to not only actually the product we produce, because that's a different spectrum, but also the spaces. And to touch a little bit on that in the future, and things we have explored is 3D printing, not only shoes, but also materials for the spaces.
If the landlord then is pushing the sustainability, it's helping the smaller brands learn from the bigger brands, hopefully, and we bring everyone up so everyone comes to the same level. But I think it's very key.
The whole biophilic approach with the facade and bringing in the green into the building, is definitely something that we see as part of the future thinking, because it has these massive glass facades on the outside, but it has this green on the inside. I think this tension is something that makes you want to explore further, because it makes you feel maybe sometimes even a little bit more uncomfortable, but also more conscious of the space you're at.
There's this idea of the sensibilities of the things that we forget: fresh air and water, and reminders of plantation. And I kind of think the idea of kind of actually sitting in nature indoors or open air could be quite amazing in these spaces. And you work with landscape designers that can create scent and bring in different species of plants and therefore insects in nature. There could be a lot of storytelling through the natural in these spaces.
So when we want to look at how the podium could be developed to address the notion of well-being, it's really about how do you start to connect with wellness pioneers is a term that we use quite frequently in IKEA. And how we define a wellness pioneer is an individual who basically has expertise within that space. And often what we do is we work with small, local, independent wellness pioneers who can actually share their expertise on how to return to a much more holistic form of well-being, so that it enables the many to carve out a new rhythm in their daily lives. So one thing I would suggest that we need to create spaces that are flexible and adaptive, but it's about looking into the community and bringing them into that space so that we have the tools and expertise from others that we can learn from, and how to adopt these healthier lifestyle choices, and also how do we start to embrace self-care rituals. So in essence, it's not just about creating, a spa, for example, that they can go and they can, relax and what have you. But it's also about looking beyond that. What are the tools that we can provide these people so that they can do it themselves as well?
So it's interesting that when talking about sustainability, the panel not only addresses materials and nature, but also embracing a more circular economy. So the experts talk about, Matt, for instance, talk about a food bank, repair shops, and a central point for recycling. Under which conditions would you consider balancing rent and profit with these principles of sustainability that support conscious consumption?
Well, again, Robert, I think they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I think the future is all about this, and I think if we don't introduce these elements into a building, and I'm not just talking about us, I'm talking about any developer or landlord around the world, I think profits anyway will suffer. And I think it's just a matter of time, and I think this is the future, and I think that's been picked up in the research that we did as well, and again in terms of what consumers are looking for in the future in terms of the type of experience, and brands are picking up on that, and they're expecting that from landlords. And Beulah, as a landlord for South Bank, needs to develop and introduce and integrate these sort of spaces into the building. And even if in part this is at the expense of a traditional return, I think we need to do it. I think it's critical, because if you don't do it, I think we're going to go backwards as a physical space from that perspective, because people simply won't come to that space and experience the space. So the idea of recycling, repairing, farms or gardens to produce food that then circles back into the restaurants or cafes, thinking about a podium space which is made out of 100% sustainable material, green leases, and I'm talking not about a green wash here. I'm talking about making a really serious commitment in changing the world, contributing to a better society and the planet. I think the onus is on landlords to do that, to support brands who are also doing that. The world has changed, and with it needs pioneers and people who are prepared to experiment with that.
The world has changed, you say, David, and indeed it has. We live in a digital first world where consumers are better informed than ever before, love the convenience of online shopping, and are looking for a reason to visit physical spaces, physical stores. So what does this mean for the future of retail, to be in a digital first world? That's a question that we asked the panel. Let's have a look at their replies.
Yeah, so we do believe that concept needs to have a digital twin. It needs to be as living and accessible online as offline, and there will be tons of interesting ways of doing that going forward. Then I think the metaverse is a great example of actually building a digital clone of what you actually can experience in Australia live, and maybe even actually will make people go there just because of that. 3D is essential when it comes to NFTs and the metaverse. So I think all stores and all products should be created in 3D because that's accessibility and future proof. So, I mean, it needs to be built in 3D, and you need to be able to visit all of those experiences, both digitally and also physically.
Talking about the idea of this space being represented digitally, it should probably not look and feel anywhere or anything exactly as the physical. It should be completely a caricature or I think a symbolic creation of something entirely different of this. That would make it uniquely exciting.
I know there's a lot of talk now about the metasphere and metaverse and what's happening digitally. And I think it's great that we continue to explore options in the digital world, because I do think that we are moving in that direction in terms of just making our lives easier, giving us a better quality of life, and giving us other experiences where you may not have been able to have them, whether it's travel restrictions or not being able to physically get somewhere. I think all of that will play into this new world. Will we ever become a completely digital environment? I really don't think so.
We should never underestimate the physical importance. I think what you can do with digital, the power really lies in the quantity that you can do. You can build millions of connections digitally. I'm not really interested to see another screen in the store because it's a digital screen. We are still humans. We are used to hang out with each other, but digital became such an important role in our lives that a lot of younger people have difficulties to interact with each other. And then I think like low barriers, the opportunity to allow people to talk to each other, I think that's still, for me, important.
For me, it's the podium in a shopping mall like this is about the personal interaction, which I think is very key.
From what I know in my experience, it still needs to be physical first, but it's not where we come from is you design the physical space and layer in the digital. I think in the future, it has to be a hand-holding at the very beginning and a conversation that happens from the onstart. Otherwise, it's always going to be the digital as like a afterthought. That being said, I do think that people still go shop because they want to physically touch things and they want to have that experience of being with the product or whatever it is. But in terms of the digital inside the Podium, I think it has to be an enhancement. It like if you walk in and suddenly you're immersed with the digital, I think it's great. And if it's like suddenly you're on the Wi-Fi and whatever maybe you can create an avatar or whatever, it gives you a sense of the building, gives you a sense of what the building can offer to enhance your experience. I think that's great. But in the end, people come to a physical space because they want a sense of physical community.
I think to give people a reason to meet, there's a lot of hours spent in front of screens, and we all know it from the last several years now, but it's more the gamification of life. I think people absolutely live in gaming communities, and that's amazing, and we all appreciate it, and I'm all for gamification coming into the physicality, and the idea of this crossover between digital and physical, which we constantly talk about. Is there an idea of this sort of alternative take on projection and sort of screenings, and this idea of the unexpected and a program of what does a program look like in these spaces. We kind of all laugh about silent disco, but people will go and do it, or there's these sort of kind of theatrical pieces. And I think these spaces should have a little bit of the unexpected about them. I think there's an idea of sort of surprising and delighting in some respect.
How do we marry the digital world into the physical world in the context of retail? So I think the first port of call is to actually redefine the concept of retail, and in particular the store. So what do we actually mean by the store, and what's the purpose of the store? What are the consumers of tomorrow expecting? What are their needs and aspirations? And how can we as a retailer fulfill them? And then the other thing is that we're starting to see that the concept of retail has become much more hybridized. So we're not seeing spaces that are one size fits all. So it's not, this is a store that you go to buy your groceries. We're starting to see that time and precious consumers are actually wanting to maximize how they spend their time. And retail spaces are starting to devise spaces, whether that's physical or digital, to enable them to carry out a multitude of tasks within one space so that it can have a positive effect on their lives. So when we talk about digital spaces and how we work with them, it's about understanding, how can we use those spaces to better serve our customers. We talk a bit about, how we're seeing the impact of gamification, and how within gamification, there are a lot of brands that are collaborating within that space because they see the concepts and principles of gamification actually lends itself quite well within the retail space. So there are different models that we can apply to better serve those needs. So it's really important that we recognize that consumers have a voice in kind of what they want, and they have the power to also influence that. So in essence, consumers have become both critics and creators. They're actually disrupting kind of the traditional hierarchy where consumers are not just looking for a frictionless experience that marries tech with the physical, but they actually want to play a really strong role in shaping that. So we need to understand that how we create these virtual experiences, it's about understanding the needs of the consumer, and how do we actually develop something that is meaningful, relevant, and personal.
So obviously retailers really like physical spaces to celebrate physicality and personal contacts. And digital technology should offer unexpected experience, gamification, and better serve the needs of consumers. Others strongly believe that the future of retail will be digital. So how would you approach digital infrastructure based on these seemingly opposing visions?
Well, Robert, this is where I feel that Adeline and I should turn into avatars or something like that, which would be fun. Look, it's a tricky area because I think, as a landlord, I guess we're dealing specifically in physical space, and we want people to visit that physical space and experience that physical space. But at the same time, we understand that the physical component is getting bigger and very important, but also, interestingly, it's really part of the experience, from that perspective. You're seeing brands now that, as a number of those retailers said, that are seeing the digital world again with that new generation coming up, who are living a significant part of their life in the digital world. There are digital fashion sites now. People are spending money on digital fashion as part of their avatar self within the digital world. And as a landlord, we've got to recognise that as well. So for us, I guess it is part of the experience. It is a blend of physical and digital. The digital, I think, is also part of embedding the technical or the digital side into the building, so the brands can plug in and take advantage of the digital world. But it would be pretty amazing if we had a 3D digital twin of South Bank by Beulah. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, Adeline, it'd be fantastic if someone was in Paris or London and could experience South Bank by Beulah in a digital twin, which would be quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, merging digital and physical is obviously an ongoing discussion, and we really don't know how it will develop, in the next few years. But it will always be an ongoing challenge, I guess, that we will love to push the boundaries in, and working closely with engineers, with innovative companies, tech companies to develop that solution together. How do we create experiences in a physical way that you can't replicate online? How do you extract all the benefits of all this, our whole life that's already digitized, on our mobile phones? How do you extract all those information or the conveniences of our life in this digital form into physical? Maybe it's there's a better way of shopping. Maybe, I mean, even right now we're seeing stores, integrating technologies where you don't even need to pay. You just take something and you walk out and that's it. And that's a really great example of convenience and how you really merge digital and physical, just so it's really enhancing your life. It's saving time. So what if, in a retail sense, we have all this information already in our where we shop, what we like, our sizes, things like that. How do we then merge those information with the shops that we love to go to physically? That, I guess, it would be an interesting topic or solution to look into. And how do we merge experiences like what you said, David, locally and overseas? How do we see what's available somewhere else that's not here, but we can see it when we visit South Bank by Beulah, for example? So all of these, I think, are great topics or challenges that we love to look into and explore. And this is a great opportunity for starting from scratch now, and thinking about the future of retail in 5 or 6 years' time.
So Adeline and David, we're nearing the end of this event. We've had a look at the future of retail from various angles. We discussed the factors that lead to a successful integration of retail in a mixed-use environment like South Bank by Beulah. We had a look at what the consumer experience should be like and how to make the Podium relevant for local and international communities. We also asked our panelists how to create betterment for people and the planet. And finally, how to design for a digital first world. So our last question for the panel was, can you sum up the future of retail in just 3 words? Let's have a look at who will manage.
Sort of connecting the dots between the digital and the physical world. Stores need to be much more than transaction. It cannot be only focused about sales. More concepts for stores.
It sounds strange to say that the future of physical spaces is digital, but in all honesty, it is. And how you can connect those two worlds will make or break a brand.
So the future of retail in 3 words would be relevance, connected, and ownership.
Experiential, fluid, and flexible.
Honesty, utility, and personality.
Inclusive, engaging, immersive.
The future of retail is better for the people and the planet. I think if we can keep that in mind, I think we're there.
And I hope you saw this coming, David and Adeline. Can you sum up retail in just 3 words? The future of
Thanks,
retail.
Robert. Well, I mean, it was almost sort of all said, wasn't it? I mean, I definitely think
I guess we have reached the end of this event, but not quite. First, I would like to thank all the experts for sharing their provocative thoughts. I really enjoyed watching and listening to them, and I hope you did too. So now it's time to open up to our audience for some questions. And before we organized this event, we reached out to you, to the audience, and we asked you to send in some questions, to submit some questions. And lots of them have done so, and thank you for that. And we selected a couple of them that we would like David and Adeline to address now. And since we are running out of time a little bit, I suggest that we stick to two. The first question that comes to mind is, can you imagine what activities brands can use their stores or touch points for? And that's asked by Jocelyn Sacre in France.
That was what activities brands can use their stores for. I mean, I think for me, it's about programming. It's about that experience. It's about it goes back to some of those comments from the retail experts, and this is very much at our forefront as well. It's about creating a space where you can set up areas like repairs, learning areas. It's about experience. It's not about just the sales, transactions. So I think those sort of activities are super important going forward.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. That was submitted by Daniel Moshinger in Australia. And actually, I have the feeling this already has been answered by the panel. The question is, how do you view digital first merging with physical retail experiences as opposed to physical merging with digital? And that's what makes it interesting, this twist. So David, if you want.
Yeah, I was just reading that again, Robert, just to make sure I understood that question. So how do we view digital first merging with physical? Well, it's an interesting sort of play there, because as a landlord, well, I guess we're thinking physical and then digital from that perspective.
Exactly.
But I think it's probably about that, how we can bring the physical aspect into the digital aspect. So I'm thinking about something where someone is experiencing something digitally, but for example, from a food perspective, they may get a physical food service to support the digital side in some shape or form. So maybe that goes back to that idea of, watching something in the metaverse, and maybe it is a digital restaurant, from that perspective, and you're experiencing that restaurant experience digitally, but then the restaurant itself then delivers physical food. So that could be interesting. Or it could be a fashion store, for example, which you are looking at how things are being made or repaired, or where the product is from in the physical world, and then the actual in the digital world, and then the physical garment then arrives, in terms of the purchase or something like that. So it's an interesting twist.
It sounds fantastic, David. And I'm sure you have many more ideas. But we have reached the end of this event, and that's the truth. So we are actually far over time. So I want to thank you, Adeline and David, for providing a stage to discuss the shape of things to come. So by the looks of it, a retail revolution is awaiting us, and South Bank by Beulah will be the place to witness it come 2028. Our audience, thanks for watching, which is the first part of Next and Now, exploring the future of retail. So there will be a second part coming up, and that will take place between the 30th of May and the 3rd of June. So that's on a daily basis between the 30th of May and the 3rd of June, when 5 of the world's most innovative and leading retail design studios will share their visions of the future within the context of this particular project, South Bank by Beulah. So I hope to see you again at that time. I'm sure Adeline and David will be there, and thanks again. and the rest of the world, stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching.
Right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.